minutes, give you guys a little heads up, a little, I don't know, well, yeah, whatever you call it, coverage of all this stuff. So I hope you enjoy it. All right. If you want to throw in the chat, anyone ever used StoryMaps before? Throw a couple thumbs up or message or anything. All right, some people, cool. Awesome. Yeah, story maps are super, super, super cool. I hope you guys all start to use them more. They come with your GIS licenses for the most part that you have. And they like the tons of agencies are using them, whether it's the Nature Conservancy, Library of Congress, anybody who's trying to tell like stories. You see a lot of them come out at the end of the year. It's a great way to recap what you've been working on, but also a cool permanent way to put a bunch of media up online. If you're not someone who knows how to design a website or host all that stuff, you already have it as part of your license. And you'll want to make sure that you have a creator type license. We have mobile workers, creators, viewers. So you might need to do some shifting around. So contact your person if you need to get an upgraded license to do it, but it's a lot of fun. So what I'm going to show you is there are two types of story map content. You get started by going to storymaps.arcgis.com. And here you're going to have the option to see what your organization is already creating, so you can get some inspiration. I see lots of these coming from the TDEC side, which is awesome. And you can see your own content, things that you've made, or maybe you stick them in a group because you're from one park or one division working together, and that's where you want to store all your stuff. It works just like other online content. You can make it private. You don't have to publish it. Later on, you can open it up to just your organization if you want to keep things secured behind a login, or you can go a little bit deeper and spread it out to the whole public by making it a public-facing website, StoryMap. And there's two different things. There's stories and briefings. You'll see how this one kind of looks like a PowerPoint presentation. That's because it sort of is. It's like an online PowerPoint, very chronological and stuff. And I'll get to these other two ones after. So we'll share out a link to this. This is all the information you might need to get started. And you can click through it just like an online PowerPoint. So if you ever do a presentation to the public, this is a fun way to make a PowerPoint that you can share with them after with the media. And you can keep editing it and changing it over time. So you don't have to deal with sharing with OneDrive and SharePoint links. It's just some GIS content. So what is it? It's a website. You can use lots of different images and videos and maps all together, and it works on mobile devices. You don't have to do any customization like you have to do with other GIS apps. Everything is designed with iPad or tablet or iPhone user in mind, Android users as well. Anyone can use it that has a license. And this is the difference between articles, which is what we're really going to focus on, and briefings, which is what I'm showing you here. I've organized this in a briefing, which is supposed to be short, succinct information. You can design your own theme, which is like fonts and colors that you want to be used so that you can reuse it again. So if you think you're going to be doing multiple story maps, it's really good to set up a theme that's going to work for you. We have made a couple with state parks that you can just use. So it has some of our state park colors, just saves you a couple minutes of setting things up. So what I like to do when I'm building a story map is really do an outline first. And I know that sounds kind of silly, but write down all your content, bullet point everything out, and also build a media folder of everything that you might want to use. Your folders, your photos, videos, logos, audio clips, anything, your quotes that you're going to have from people, put it all in one folder. Because then when you're designing online, you can just keep going back to that same folder and not spend all that time looking for items on your desktop and email. When you start one, I recommend trying out some of the different options in the quick start first, rather than building from scratch. From scratch, you're going to have a lot more questions to figure out. But what you want to do is think about what is the point? Do you want your audience to be scrolling? Are they going to be visiting this at a computer stand at your office, or is it going to be on a display board? Are they going to just be doing it on their phone? How much time do you want them to be reading or scrolling? Is it meant to be, spend a morning reading about this? Or is it a quick lesson plan that you want for teachers to be able to use to learn about your topic? So there's also a lot of cool tools. There's going to be maps. There's even timeline widgets. So if you have something that's going to be a timeline, maybe don't put them all as different headers, but actually do something as a sliding timeline so that your content moves along with time. And that's a really cool new thing they have. So this first example I'll show you is called a sidecar, and it looks like this. Basically, you have headers at the top, you have a map. So the whole idea, a lot of this is map centric, um, where you design a map and you set these bookmarks. So whether I click on each of these parks, it's going to zoom into the trailhead of each of one of these stories. So that might be beneficial if you are trying to allow someone to explore at their whim, find something that's interesting to them. What this doesn't have is like a numbered order. So it's really up to the user to pick things that are interesting to them. As you scroll, the content from that bookmark, from this heading, is all zoomed into this map and related there. And so that's pretty cool. The next type they have is a guided map tour. And so this is when you want to have something in chronological order or you're telling a specific story. This is really great for historical things. So at Alvin to York, they wanted to tell the story of the what was it this vessel, the SS St. Louis, and its pilgrimage all across America and during war times. And it's super cool. You build a base map in the background, pick your map just like you do with web maps, and add content like photos and text. And this is just the start of one. We just threw out the bones together to talk about this one. And it's just super cool because it jumps around. It's got these nice leader lines that go connect the places to each other. So it's really visual. You'll see if you go to like the Tennessee State Museum, they actually have some of these on display using this style, and it's interactive for you to touch on a screen. So um, you might not see this whole website. It might be disguised somewhere, but a lot of different groups are using story maps. Even newspapers use these a lot. Another fun widget you can have is this cool swipe tool. This is great if you have like a historical map or something, or a before and after photo of maybe the same location, but maybe you're removing invasive species or something, and you wanted to let the user have some fun. You can do this with your thumb on the phone or using a mouse on the computer to go back and forth. This other type is called an explorer map. So these are all like the map related ones. And you have the same idea. You get the title up top, some pictures. You can throw in some text at first, and then you get into exploring. And this one is there's no order. You see the map up front, and you can pick on different things, and it will zoom in. It'll blow up the photo and the text for that area. Um, really similar to that first one. But yeah, it's just not in order. And this one is different because you don't see the headings going across the top. You're kind of meant to interact with it using the map or just by scrolling through. So those are some of the easy things. You can also add in your logos, your links out to places. Always really helpful, I think, to put a publish date and your update date down at the bottom because people want to know that they're looking at something that's more recent that you put some time into recently. So continue to keep those updated. Or you can go full custom. And the Division of Natural Areas makes this amazing story map each year. And they have story maps within story maps. They got every type of tool imaginable going on at the same time. It'll probably take a second to load because there's so much good stuff there. I want to show you one that we put out recently and show you a difference. This is the one, we have your bookmarks, your headings at the top, which is great. Allows someone to not have to scroll on forever. If you notice, the scroll bar is pretty tiny up here. So think about your iPhone users and your computer users. Maybe you don't want them to have to scroll on forever. So that's why it's helpful to stick on these different headers at the top. In this case, I had a map that I didn't want people to interact with. I just wanted to kind of show them what it was like. And so what I did is I just did a screen recording of me interacting with the map. That way they don't have to know anything about how this map works. I can zoom into the things that I really want to show them. And then I just embed the recording of this map behind here with the text. So I can keep scrolling on the text as the video happens down below. I know I'm moving super, super fast, but maybe you can slow me down and watch it in like half speed after. So basically on each one of these sections, I have a different video that I recorded stuck behind each of these. And it's just a fun way. Like you see a lot of organizations do stuff with video because it gets people super excited. And if I want to look at this on my phone, what does that look like? You want to think a good way to do this if you're designing on a computer is to press the button F12 on your keyboard. That's one of the shortcuts. And what that does is it shows you what it looks like on different devices. So you can see what it'll look like on an iPad, how much space you have. This is pretty cool. I think that this one's working out all right. I have that big strip column going down the middle. I have my interactive video, my recorder video in the background. But you notice when I go onto a phone, my content and text is covering up the video the whole time. Everything is like nice and evenly like distributed and doesn't look too bad, but I am losing the value of that video behind. So I wouldn't pick having like a recorded video or an image content that you want to focus on be behind if you're going to expect a lot of people to be using it on their phone. In this case, the most important thing should be what's in this column, and you should be able to ignore the background. Okay, I'll get out of that for a second. Let's see if we can go on back to natural areas real quick. So they had different headers, scrolling. So you see we scrolled into this one, and then we get to scroll on the side as well. They have a gallery, an image gallery, so an awesome spot where you can put in like 6, 8 images all together that you can blow up, and you can even put captions down at the bottom. You can add audio recordings to that. You could have someone talking about this, or it could be a series of little videos, which is super cool. They did a lot of things where they have, this is another type of gallery that you can go through. So as you click through, the content on the left changes and so does the image. So another great use. So this is what happens when you go full custom. You have some more options. This is that tour again, where you're going around from place to place as it scrolls. Again, if I look at this on a phone, you do lose a little bit of the video. Actually, sorry, you don't lose anything. It's structured so that the interactive map actually goes on the top of your screen while you scroll through everything down here. So it almost works even better on your phone in this case than it does on your computer. So that's just really cool. Okay, a couple more little things. Different media that you can put in. All of these buttons, you can have buttons that link out to other websites. And I'll show you what Leah has done with this one. So she has the headers up top. She put video instead of images on the side. On this one, she's got pop out so you can see a bigger map, and the Rhododendron Festival, so you could link out to different events and stuff that are going on. Don't forget a fishing license. That's a link that has an actual box, so it's a little bit more bold. You can add in different audio. Beautiful. So you can have the audio start here, but you can also have it just turn on as soon as someone scrolls to a certain section of a page, which is really cool. And so we were talking about the different maps. I want to just show you real quick what that looks like. So I was making a demo for a COE, and let me just get on up here. The idea was like, maybe we could have an interactive map that teaches people about the different rapids along the river. And so this one is going to have different tour stops along a map. And what I did is I created a web map where I made the different points. So to do that, I had to make a layer, create the fields that said it's going to have name, it's going to have the location, and maybe a different symbol based on whether it's a rapid versus a photo op. So I make the web map and then I embed it into the story map. You'll notice that there's like some symbology on here, and each of the tour stops as you go from one to the other, you zoom in and you set the bookmarks. So if I want to add another one though, it asks me add a location. This is kind of the short and easy way to do that. So if you don't want to make a whole GIS map and you don't have any mapping experience, you can still add locations and bookmarks. So I could zoom into here and say that the rapid is right here, and it's going to drop like a custom pointer right there. And now when I get to tour stop number 2, it zooms right there. I didn't have to do any kind of mapping or creating a feature layer. So if you were going to do like a newspaper article, that's where it happens a lot. People just make these quick maps, have text and photos along the side. I mean, you could do a whole like crime scene report this way. Hopefully we don't run into that anything with anything TDEC related. We talked about sharing. You can also enable this to show up in Google search results. For a long time, StoryMaps didn't. This technology came out in 2011, so anyone who's taken a GIS class in the last couple of years has probably bumped into it. But the biggest thing was like I could search for exactly what I wanted in Google, and this would never show up. Now there's a button to turn it on for Google enabled, and that way it will show up in Google search results. When we send this out to you guys later on, there will be all these different resources that you can watch as Esri training videos. And the last thing I want to do is come back over to like your homepage here. There you can learn all about what's the newest thing. Always fun to see what new features they come out with every couple months, tutorials, and explore other stories from different organizations. So you'll notice that I've made a bunch of stories so far, but what if I was working at a single park and I had a lot of stories? A good way to avoid that scrolling fatigue is to create a collection of the stories all together. And what you can do is this third option called collections. When you make a new collection, it allows you to edit and drag and drop the different content that you want on here. And it could be, in this case, I had 4 story maps, but I also had like a dashboard that I made or something in Experience Builder, or a web map, or a web app, or a PDF document. So you could have something that you want to talk about. Maybe I'm going to keep using park examples because I'm more familiar, but you could have like this park homepage where you could have 3 stories. You could have 3 links out to calendar events all show up in this nice little gallery thing. One could even be that something that gets changed out frequently, which is like message from the ranger for the season. Just a really cool way of collecting all that information in one spot. And when I want to show you what that looks like when it's going really well. So Esri hosts a story map competition every year. So hopefully you guys will all enter and win after watching this presentation. And what they did is they made a collection with 13 of their favorite stories, all embedded into one single story map URL. And so you can click through the different ones. And as you get to each page, the story map just starts up because it's in that collection. You have the headers right there, and each of these might be formatted differently. So if I go over here to, I think, number 8, here we go, another one very similar. You're starting to recognize the different themes that people use. But number 8, I thought was super cool. This collection links out to a collection that CSKT made, the Confederated Salish and Kootenai Tribes of the Flathead Reservation. They made a collection, and each one of these is its own story map, but it looks super pretty. Really, what this is not like an introduction button. It's I think it's just an image that they typed the word introduction on, uploaded the image, and then set a link to go to that story map. So if I click on it, all of a sudden now I'm inside this story map, and I've got these nice pretty headers up top that get highlighted as I go to each, and it's just a nice way to connect things. And so now we're 3 headers deep now. So we had this collection, another collection. You can kind of see how it has this window, and then we have the headers down here. So try not to make your stories as run on as my presentation is. Try to make them simple. Figure out ways to collect and organize them so that a user can jump around from the topics that they're interested in. You'll see like these are just kept simple. There's only 3 different sections in each of these. And this is what that timeline looks like, where you have you put a timestamp on here, and then you can scroll through different related content for each of them. So that was super fast. That's about all I have for there, and we'll send you some links. But I wanted to open it up to any questions before we see what other people have actually used this in TDEC and how cool it can be. So does anyone have any questions?
Awesome work, Andrew. That was a great overview, and really appreciate you putting together that material for us to better understand how to use the tool. Yeah, if anybody has any questions, feel free to put them in the chat, or just come off mute. So, Andrew, I guess one thing is you create like an annual, the one example you were showing for the kind of 2023 overview for parks. Do you do that every single year? And like, is that a communication tool you use for external stakeholders and talk about topics with leadership, or how's all that organized?
Yeah, this was the first year we'd done one, and that was kind of state park ranger specific, but natural areas does it every year. And so I feel like a great thing for them to do would be create a collection that they can put on their website. And so it's each year's recap. And then eventually you could make a master story map that's like all the best things from each of those. And it's great because you can share it with the external stakeholders as long as there's nothing sensitive in there. Um, yeah, it's really cool. Everyone so far has liked it that we've been able to send it out, and we use it as a way to tell the stories of the people on the ground. It's really hard to kind of get that idea just by like me recapping it in my voice. Better just we interviewed the rangers, they provided quotes and images, and it's just been really fun. So I thank everybody who participated in that.
Yeah, it's a really neat way to kind of make it more of a living document. We've always thought of these different reports that we generate on an annual basis or quarterly, whatever it might be. And, that we've always kind of historically thought of those as like PDF snapshots of our work. And like, this is a really neat way for those things to just kind of keep evolving and continue to be improved, or, make edits and optimization as we need. One of the things that, one of the ideas that the Division of Water has used it for is for some of these annual reports that we submit to EPA. And so, while that might not be something that everybody would have thought of necessarily straight out of the box, it is, a really good use for that, and a neat way to be able to kind of have that content more dynamic and changing as it needs to, instead of just being one report that's submitted that kind of sits there static. So great use of the tool, most definitely.
Yeah, and a lot of these too are printable too, so it'll print it out in a nice PDF format. And again, everything is formatted so that it can be used on a mobile device and tablets. There was Esri Story Maps, which was from 2011 to 2019, and now we're into ArcGIS Story Maps. But the old stuff didn't actually work on mobile phones as well. So if you're starting now, you're in good hands because everything will be a lot better for people.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much again. That was a really great overview, and I know that it was tough to kind of breeze through it that fast, but that was really helpful, and I appreciate you putting all that information together. Well, if there aren't any other questions, Dylan was giving some feedback about how cool that would be to combine the different years into tabs under one single URL at some point for DNA stuff. So most definitely. All right, well, we'll go ahead and transition into our first presentation. We want to welcome a newcomer to TDEC Division Remediation. I guess, I don't know how long Callie's been here, so you can go ahead and provide some of that information after you get started off here. But we wanted to highlight, Andrew and I were kind of talking about what we would do for this GIS user group, and Andrew says, "Who in the heck is Callie? She's got all sorts of content out there and it looks awesome." So that was really what spurred us on to interface with you, and really appreciate you joining us today and telling us what you've done with the tool, and to help put us in a better position and empower other GIS users in TDEC. So go ahead and take it away. Maybe give us a little bit of an explanation of when you joined DOR and the purpose for your use of the tool.
Sure. Thank you so much for the introduction, Brian. Hi, everybody. I'm Callie. I've been working for the Division of Remediation for, well, I guess I started in the middle of August, so it's not been very long. But yeah, one of my main tasks, I guess, as part of my job is to create a public-facing website. And so I took my, what I knew about using story maps and GIS that I had used in the past, and I said this would be a great tool for like this type of project. And so I'll kind of explain a little bit what I mean. And I'm going to share my screen. Can you guys see my presentation?
Yep, we can see it
Yep.
perfectly.
Okay, great. Yeah, so I'm basically going to give you an overview of what my like program is, and then how I'm using story maps to kind of describe the program. So Tennessee Clean, or abbreviated TN Clean, is it is a selection of 21 sites that, for one reason or another, have fallen through the cracks of having a funding mechanism. So typically, in the Division of Remediation, a site will be contaminated and there will be a responsible party that we can point to say, hey, you need to pay the money to help us clean this up. But sometimes that party will go out of business, or maybe the property owner will die and it'll be, the property will be reclaimed into the state. And so sometimes that happens where these sites are left without a funding mechanism. And so these sites are now the state's responsibility. And so that's basically like the overview. To make sure that everybody doesn't accuse us of, spending money poorly, I'm going to say, hey, here's like a very public representation of what we're doing with this money. And so that's why the story map is a good choice, because it says, here's where it is, here's the details of what happened like historically, and here's where it's at now, and here's how we're using state money to clean it up. So I have 3 and maybe 4 story maps to show you. So I'm going to show you my windows. Hang on, let me readjust. Okay. So I have, first of all, I have an overview story map that says, here's all the sites. And it has a very good explanation of what I just said, basically, which is, here's the program overview. We're just using state money to clean up these particular sites. And then here's a story map that, or a map that just has all the different sites pinpointed on the map of Tennessee. And the colors represent what division it's under. And so most of them are remediation. There's some that are solid waste, and this one is American Nuclear, which is a radiological health site. So that's just like, quick overview map that shows everything that you need to know. But then if you're more curious, then you can keep scrolling, and I have here short paragraph descriptions for each of the sites. And so as you keep scrolling, the site that is highlighted will appear in a darker red, and you can keep reading about the paragraphs. But what I'm going to do when I finish all of them is I'm going to have a button at the bottom here that says like, click here for more information, at which point it will launch into the story map for each site in detail. And so this is one of those examples for a site called Chromasco, which was a chromium smelting operation that I think closed in maybe the 80s, but it's been a long-standing site with TDEC because it's so creepy and a little bit nasty, and there's a lot of historical contamination. And so here's the story map for that. And as Andrew said, you can create themes, which is what I did for all of the TN Clean sites. Is I made one theme so that you could basically tell immediately upon looking that, okay, this is one of the TN Clean sites, because they'll all have that description, that like visual in common. And so as you scroll, you can flip through the photos if you want. And the idea behind having story maps is that you can have as much or as little information as you want. You can click on things, you can read things, or you can just keep scrolling. And the amount of detail that is provided is basically up to you, how much you want to read. So I'll go ahead and copy this and put it in the meeting chat so that if you want, you can scroll along and look at it and click details, like I said. And I'll do that for each of those sites. But let me share that again. Okay. But yeah, so Chromasco looked a lot more industrial when it still had buildings on it. So my idea with this slide is to show the present. Well, I guess this is 2018, so the near present and the past. So you can kind of contrast, the way that the site used to look and the way it looks today. And as you keep scrolling, basically the current questions that we have about the site are, what is the effect of the industrial landfill on site? And all of this is detailed in the text, but I'm not gonna just read aloud. I'm gonna try to, describe what is going on with the site. But there's a landfill where they buried a lot of chromium slag and raw materials, and it's this outline, this red outline. And then there's a surface water ditch that is also contaminated. And we think that probably water is running off of the red landfill and going into the ditch, and that's what's causing the contamination in the ditch. So those two spots are our big focuses. And the goal also with having these story maps is that ideally you won't have to read any of this text. As you scroll, you can say, okay, well, that's the past, this is the present, whatever. You keep scrolling. Okay, these two areas are highlighted. They must be important. okay, these dots, that's probably where, these are points of interest or something. This is actually where we've sampled, and then the colors represent what type of sample. So the green are surface water samples, the orange are sediment samples along this ditch, and then the blue are groundwater wells. And so to describe what those results were, I have highlighted in orange the sediment samples. Darker orange is more contaminated, lighter orange is less contaminated, and that also runs along the path of the surface water. So basically, the takeaway from this image is that on the left side of the graph, or of the map, there's more contamination, there's less contamination than the right side, which is a little bit concerning because this is now a different parcel. So if there's any more contamination under here, that's going to be a big problem for us to clean up. And then the same thing basically for the groundwater is that we have 3 samples, only one of them was contaminated, and it just so happens to be the most down gradient of that landfill. So the implication there is that contamination was picked up as the groundwater passed through the landfill. And the same thing for surface water. Dark green is contaminated, light green is not. So the ditch was contaminated while the surface water wasn't. And then maybe an explanation as to why that surface water is contaminated and this surface water wasn't, is that it runs off the landfill, like I said earlier. And so we haven't started any of the remediation on this site yet. This has basically just been, so far a background investigation and describing the historical use of the site, and explaining that our next steps are going to be to remediate the landfill and then eventually the ditch once we've fixed the landfill problem. And then we have more pictures of the landfill. And at the bottom of all of these, I'll have, if you want more information, there's plenty of it. You can go to the DR, the Division of Remediation homepage. You can get a public records request, or you could go into the DOR data viewer. And so I have another site here. These sites are all very different too, in terms of what type of contamination, the histories, and current uses. Cremasco it's pretty much not in use anymore. Whereas this one is a very complicated site that is still in use. So this site is in Lawrenceburg, and it's called Murray, Ohio, because it was the Murray Corporation of Ohio. It started out in Ohio. And yeah, again, you should just be able to scroll along, reading and clicking on the map as you want, and you can interact with all of these pins as you scroll down. But essentially, this site is a huge factory. It's a big plant that it's on karst terrain. So any contamination is very easily spread through the groundwater. And these 2 buildings are about 70 acres, I think, together. So it's a large area to cover, and there's different types of contamination everywhere. And so this was a big site to tackle and to figure out exactly how I wanted to explain, the different types of histories, because there's, we call it the Murray, Ohio, plant because that was the source of the historical contamination, but we can't rule out any current tenants as contaminators. So there was just a lot of moving pieces. And so this is how I tried to demonstrate all that information. So I explained that, here's what we know about the site. We know that in 2006, we did some groundwater sampling at these wells, and that had varying results. And so as you click on the wells, and again, you don't have to click on the wells, you don't have to learn about anything else besides, just the sidecar that you're reading. But if you did have questions, or if you were curious, you could click on these and find out exactly how much contamination there was, when they sampled it, what was the main contaminant. And this is all data in a CSV that I imported with the coordinates of the wells to kind of simplify down, so that, again, this is supposed to be designed so that the public can read it and understand. It's not really for scientists. I don't have the exact concentrations in micrograms per liter on this particular map, but I could do that if I felt like the audience would understand some more detail. But for the different wells, because there's so many different types of contamination at this site, I said, okay, well, instead of having every contaminant that I'm sampling for listed, I'm just going to say this was the main concern at this well. So for example, this well that I've clicked on, monitoring well 13, there was free product, which was probably oil. It looked a lot like oil, just sitting in the well the last couple times that it's been sampled. So we couldn't actually sample it. So instead of saying, well, we didn't get any analytical results, I'm saying, well, we know that oil is in the well, and that's a problem. So that's why primary contaminants is a field there instead of, oil, and then the concentration being the value. And same thing with this one, monitoring well 11, chlorinated solvents are a big problem. This whole area at the southwestern end of the site was where there used to be a water treatment plant. And so all of these wells have chlorinated solvents. And so I'm trying to explain as you scroll through the map that this area was where the chlorinated solvents are the worst because there was a wastewater treatment plant. And if you wanted to, again, click on the wells to learn more, you can do that. Same thing with the Northwest. There was a thinner tank. I think that was about paint thinner because that was where they had the facility made like bicycles and lawnmowers and things like that. So they had a lot going on, but this is where the thinners were. There wasn't a lot of contamination here, but there were some chlorinated solvents and chromium and some VOCs and PAHs. And then same thing over here. There was a fuel tank over here, and I think up here somewhere there used to be a chromium still. So monitoring well 8 is it's probably the most contaminated with chromium as well as some chlorinated solvents. And so yeah, the idea behind this is that you can kind of fly to the different parts of the site, learn what's wrong with them. This was that well that I mentioned that had free product in it. So although it's not fair to say that we didn't sample it, because although we didn't, we can clearly see that there's some contamination in it. Yeah, and then continuing on with the different areas of the site. So you can see, there's different areas that have different types of contamination, and that's why I have these colors listed here. And so we haven't gotten any data yet from this site. This has just been like a historical review of what I've seen from prior investigations. So it's been a little bit difficult to, thus far anyway, it's only been 5 or so months that I've been working on this. It's been kind of difficult to, describe how we're using the money because we haven't really started doing much yet. We've conducted some of the investigations, but we don't have any results yet, or we have to resample, things like that. So I'm kind of, for now, I've mostly just been describing what we've done so far. And so once we get those results back, we've only sampled in 2 areas of the building so far because the owner wants to do some construction. So depending on what those say, if it's not important, then I probably won't mention it. But right now, that's the only data that we're expecting from the site. And again, at the bottom, we have what you'll want to see as a Tennessee citizen. If you want more information, here's how you can find more information. And then finally, let's see, how am I doing on time? Okay. And then finally, this is another site that we've done a good bit of investigation on so far. And this one is in Newport, Tennessee. And it was an audio speaker assembly plant in Newport. And it has a chlorinated solvent problem. And this site is one of my favorites to describe because it's very, it's pretty simple. Like the other two there's just so much going on. They're so big, there's so much contamination. But this one, it's pretty easy to say. This is, I think, the first story map that I worked on as an employee of the state of Tennessee. In this site, you can really clearly say, okay, here's the one contaminant that's a problem. Here's exactly where it's a problem. Here's where we know it came from. And here's what we're doing about it. So historically, this is the site of that speaker assembly plant. And yeah, this is the whole property, but the facility is just that building. Today, it's used as a warehouse. It's not used full time by any employees. So at max, I think there would only be, I think it was like 2 hours a day or something for employees to be there. And so the current contamination is right around this X, which marks the spot of where there used to be an underground storage tank that was filled with an industrial cleaning solvent, chlorinated solvent. And at some point, they, I think it was in the 70s, yeah, 1971, they stopped using the tank and they filled it with sand. And later, when the facility changed hands, they tried to remove the tank and they noticed that there was sand all over inside the pit. So that implies that the other contents of the tank had also escaped. And so around 2001, we knew that there was a problem and had to start investigating how bad that problem was. So we installed these 6 monitoring wells around the site to kind of pinpoint, has the chlorinated solvent escaped into the groundwater? Is it remaining around that spot in the soil? How's the soil gas looking? And then I have a little bit, again, because this is designed for the public, I kind of explain. So we know that groundwater moves in a certain direction. We know that it moves at this rate. And so that's why we picked these locations. And these spots were where we saw chlorinated solvent contamination. Well, the other 3 didn't have any contamination. And then I explained also that the groundwater flows this way. So any contamination that might have come from here, it would make sense that we see these results for contamination along the path of groundwater instead of up here, down here, and all the way out here, where the groundwater probably wouldn't have picked up contamination. And then the same thing, so that was like the groundwater investigation. I'm doing the same thing for soil gas, and kind of explaining where we sampled. And again, only one of these pins came back as a contaminated spot. And it's, again, the one closest to the underground storage tank. So it's a lot easier to say, look, all these other places are clean. There's no contamination here. And then there's only a little bit right here. So in them being in such close proximity, the pin being in such close proximity to the underground storage tank, it's a lot easier to explain than to have, more complicated results. So I like this site because it's just easier to explain. And then I haven't finished this one, of course, because we haven't started the remediation, but once we get working on it and like interpreting these results and figuring out, what else to do, there's already been, a removal of the storage tank and some soil around there. So me and my coworker are still strategizing how to best address the site. But once we do, we will have another section for the site and all of the sites to explain how we're going to remediate. So with that, those are my examples. If anybody has any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Yeah, it looks like we have one question from Boyan. Go ahead, Boyan.
Great story maps, Callie. Quick question is, when you publish this information, I'm sure it goes through some internal review of what is published with respect to describing facilities and problems at the site. Does it have to go to OGC as well for their blessing?
So we haven't published any of them yet, like on the tn.gov website. Right now if you can Google them. For most of them, except for the ones that I've shared today, you can't Google them, so you'd have to have a link to access them. So we haven't quite figured out the logistics of who's going to approve it, but my boss has been looking at them and giving me feedback on what I should change, what seems reasonable, what seems like we should probably have OGC look at. But we haven't actually gotten to the stage yet where we have had anyone from OGC look at them because we're not ready to publish quite yet. Most of them are, I've only got the historical investigations done because we don't have any current work going on. So I think once we're, have done a lot of current work, then we'll finally be ready to publish. Then we'll probably, look into those legal questions.
Looks great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else have any questions? Feel free to put them in the chat or come off mute, raise your hand, either way. Yeah, let's see. Remind me, who is Tara was asking, remind me, who is the intended audience for these?
It's just the public. So if you're, concerned landowner, if maybe you're a neighbor to one of these sites and you have questions, it's kind of designed to make the workload easier for project managers. So if they receive a call from a citizen who's concerned, it's a lot easier to point them towards the story map than to say, okay, let me review, everything about your site. Let me figure out how I can explain this in plain English. So it's designed for, if people have questions about these sites, then they can get as much information as they want. And if they still have more information, then they can, go onto the DOR data viewer and get more scientific information. But this is kind of like a preliminary description of these sites.
Yeah, that's what strikes me is that, a lot of our data viewers don't really have that geospatial context to them. And so it's really hard to kind of grasp what's happening or what has happened historically. So it's a very impressive tool, and very impressed with the work that you've done to add that context and provide that kind of story for these folks. As far as some of the initial feedback that you're getting, are you for your internal folks, has it been fairly positive as far as what they've seen so far?
Yeah, I mean, I think I showed it at our statewide staff meeting. I showed the Cremasco story map, and they all seemed very excited about it because most everybody, I think, in the Division of Remediation is informed about that site and knows how scary and complex it is, and there's going to be a lot of work to do on it. So I think they were happy to see that the important information that the public might want to know is distilled into one place. And so that's my goal for the rest of the sites that are especially complex, to say, here's what you need to know if you're concerned about it. So I think everyone's looking forward to having, the project managers are looking forward to having their sites have story maps. And I'm certainly excited to have them done.
Andrew, did you have any questions?
Yeah, you might have covered it, but just to reiterate, where do you like store all this once you send it out the first time? Do you have a idea on where, like, how to point people towards it? Like, will it just be like a file, or do you guys have like some kind of hub or something?
Yeah, I can show you. We have this, here. There's a tn.gov website that I have put together. And so what I'll do right now, it's just, a picture and a paragraph, but at the bottom of every one of them, I'll say, click here for the story map, and then it'll link to the story maps. So right now it's like, before, this is the one that, OGC will be aware of. And, right now there's nothing concerning on any of these sites or any of these tabs, because there's not very much detail. But when we're ready to publish all the story maps, we'll have a link to them on the Tennessee.gov website.
Cool, perfect. Yeah, that makes, yeah, because everyone can get those sites edited and stuff. That's awesome. It's a great spot.
Yeah, what a neat tool just for creating that kind of transparency, like you were saying, Callie, for especially these big programs that are being generated as a result of all the different funding avenues for, whether that's infrastructure, like you're talking about with remediation sites. So really love that, the geospatial context is being used for that transparency to the public. So great work.
Thank you.
Awesome. Well, if nobody else has any other questions, we'll go ahead and merge into our next presentation. Our next presentation is from Tara Pedraza. She's with the TDEC Office of External Affairs, and she's going to be talking about GIS for the Green Star Partnership Program and also an analysis of riparian corridors within Tennessee watersheds. So Tara, go ahead and take it away, and thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah. Hi, everybody. You hear me okay?
Sounds great.
Awesome. I'm going to go ahead and share my presentation. And I will note, just to kick us off here, I am not an official TDEC GIS user. A lot of the GIS work that I've been doing has been through my professional science master's classes at Tennessee Tech. And this is my final presentation from that experience, and I passed. Woohoo! So hopefully it's good enough. I know there's been lots of folks who have been through the PSM program within TDEC. I know Jeremy Hooper was one, and Brian helped him with his final project. Jeremy and I are actually serving on Tennessee Tech's advisory board for the PSM, the Environmental Informatics Masters that they offer at Tennessee Tech. So if anybody here is interested in taking that course of study, 11 classes, you can take one at a time like I did, and it'll take you 4 years to finish, but it was totally worth it. I learned a lot. And so I just wanted to give a little plug for Tennessee Tech. And now I feel like maybe I can become a TDEC GIS user. So I'm going to talk to Karen and Rane about that. As Brian said, I'm with TDEC's Office of External Affairs, so I kind of dabble in some of this GIS stuff, but it's really not part of my day-to-day job. So, but when it came down to my final project, what I wanted to do was something that would benefit our department. And so I already had some ideas around some maps that I needed for our TDEC annual report that I put together every year. And then I reached out to Brian because he's Mr. GIS in my mind. And so I was like, hey, do you have anything that you guys are working on that maybe I could help with? And so that's how he dreamed up this riparian zone analysis. And so that's the second part of my presentation. So this is the presentation I actually gave before my professors to pass my capstone. So I'm just going to like gloss through some areas of it. It's been 2 months. I can't believe that. So I've probably forgotten some things, but you guys won't grade me on this, I don't think. I went through beginning to explain what TDEC was, our organization. And then, as Brian said, I focused primarily or firstly on an easy project I knew I could bang out quickly for my internship, which was the Tennessee Green Star Partnership. And so we highlighted them as part of our annual report this year. One of the stories, we have, I think it's like 30 something members, and we had 3 just join in the last year. So I created a map to kind of highlight where those members are across the state, and then introduce the 3 new members for our annual report. So if you aren't familiar with the Tennessee Green Star Partnership, it's a program that is under the Office of Sustainable Practices. It's for those businesses that want to become environmental leaders in their industrial facility, right, in their industrial community. And so it recognizes those folks who are, looking towards continuous improvement. They want to share successes amongst their network of other manufacturer and industrial partners. And so this is kind of how we honor them and help them kind of communicate with each other to problem solve and improve their processes in this partnership. And so this was our final spread. So I created the map down here on the bottom. And then this is, it's a PDF that we work with an external designer to lay out. And then we actually go old school and print it out. And the primary audience for this are state legislators. So each one of those receive a copy of the annual report each year, nice glossy. You might see them around the, you also might see them floating around TDEC in our lobbies. And I give them to all the directors and folks who are just interested in it. So if you'd like a copy of this year's annual report, I'm actually going through the printing requisition process right now. And so I'll have some. You can reach out to me and I'd be happy to share one with you. We always post them online as well, the PDF copies. There's a link under the About section, I think it says, TDEC annual reports. And then a few years, I did create story maps for them when I had the time. I really enjoy creating story maps, flexing that creative muscle. But a few years, it's time consuming. So, and then just to add a little GIS analysis to this, I went in and did a little heat map, to kind of show where we have concentrations of our Green Star Partnership members. And you can see that some of them, a lot of them in East Tennessee and then in the Clarksville area. So I was hoping that would help the folks who manage the program to identify areas that they wanted to increase their outreach and recruit more members, and then think about, what is it that brings people to the membership? Is it word of mouth? Is it local competition? Is it because we had a staff person who lives in Clarksville and knows everybody, right? So helping to spread that throughout the state more equitably. Yeah, that's basically what I was talking about here. And then, so the second half, the meatier part of my study here had to do with riparian buffer zones and in the Huck 12 watersheds across Tennessee. And so you can see here, this is a map of the percentage of the riparian buffer in our Huck 12s that is covered in natural vegetation. So this is using the natural breaks with 5 categories going from lowest concentration, which I think was, oh gosh, I should know these off the top of my head. Can't remember my categories, but you can you can see how those areas that are around our major population centers, right, of Middle Tennessee, Nashville, Knoxville, Johnson City are particularly light, so not that naturally covered are their riparian zones. But there's also some areas that are not major metropolitan centers that are also not very vegetated. So what's going on there? So delving a little bit deeper. For those folks, because when you're doing academic study, you start at the basis. So I was trying to describe, maybe some people in here don't necessarily know what riparian buffers are and why they're important. So this is a graphic from USDA that I stole and just provide some background on why riparian buffers are important, the water quality benefits that they provide, and all that science. I'm gonna gloss over it. Okay, so next, this database, which actually is probably of interest to some of you, I would highly recommend. The U.S. Forest Service Forest to Faucets dataset is what I used for all of the GIS analysis that I did. There are many, many layers to this. It's all, of course, free and easy to access. The ones that I used primarily were, of course, the Huck 12 watersheds in Tennessee mapped. the percentage riparian buffer in natural vegetation, which I already talked about on that previous slide, the percentage land use change, which is a calculation that they made using some like climate database that they had. It's the federal program, and then the percent agriculture. But there are many, many more layers that are of interest in it. Like I said, it's been a really good database to use. The map primarily and the reason they created this database initially has to do with looking at the availability of surface water and the quality of surface water that provides for drinking water. So thinking about how susceptible certain areas are to degradation and how that threatens certain like higher concentrations of population and their drinking water. So like basically it's demonstrating here that the higher areas, the dark blue, the 91 to 100 are those areas that are really higher population focused on surface water for drinking. So in Tennessee, I wanted to look at riparian buffer zones in an urban area and in a rural area, because I saw from that initial analysis that there were areas of low vegetation in riparian areas in rural areas as well, not just in those major metropolitan areas. So who has the most to lose and how can TDEC save it? And then who has the most to gain and how could TDEC support that enriching of those areas, those riparian areas? So that's how I kind of divided up the rest of my analysis. I looked at the urban development list. So the most to lose, right? These areas that are highly developing and might have a decent quality riparian zone right now. And so how do we retain that as they develop? So this map here was looking at the land use change, which are the HUC 12s that are have the outline of dark red or orange, right? Those are the ones who are experiencing high levels of land use change. And then those areas that are darker, like I said before, are those that are higher percentage riparian buffer and natural vegetation. So those high quality riparian buffer areas. So not too surprising. If you follow any kind of demographics in Tennessee, the Clarksville area is expanding rapidly. And believe it or not, they have some pretty high quality riparian buffer zones right now. So one of the HUC 12s that I wanted to dive a little bit deeper on to help demonstrate this phenomena in Tennessee was the Dunbar Lake Red River watershed. So as you can see here, I also overlaid an MS4 layer that I found. I think I might have gotten it from this group. It was publicly available. I didn't try. I was doing this very rapidly and I didn't want to reach out to folks and burden anybody. So went with all this data was publicly available. And so you can see the dark gray shading here, lighter gray shading here is the MS4 boundary. And then the Dunbar Lake Red River watershed is the dark red in the center there outline. And then you can see it's one of the upper tier in terms of percentage riparian buffer. And so, of course, change the base map so I could see a little bit better like what's happening there from a satellite perspective. You can see the big bends in the river and that vegetation. And then these really very well darkly dense green outlines along those bends in the river. So trying to just dig a little bit deeper, figure out some of the motivating factors, driving this here. Quick stats on that HUC 12. It is 33% forestry, 23% ag, but 85% natural cover intact in those riparian areas. But it has one of the highest development risk scores, so with a potential of 30% land use change. And then, of course, it is also convenient because it's home to Dunbar Cave State Park and our Class 1 Scenic Recreational Natural Area. And then it's part of the Clarksville MS4, which delving a little bit deeper into that is actually a fairly high achieving, politically supported MS4. So this slide was just talking about some of the demographic shifts that are happening in Tennessee, how we're rapidly growing in Middle Tennessee. Here, I was trying to educate the folks on what the MS4 program is and the buffer protections that it already upholds. Talking to them about, you know, the average buffer width or the minimum buffer width when a development project comes through that's within an MS4, but also kind of highlighting some of the potential issues with MS4s and local control over programs, how enforcement might vary, how support for that program varies either financially or politically across the state. But then, you know, trying to say that what's happening in Clarksville is actually, you know, one of the better MS4s that I've dug into, that I've, you know, in my job, I hear a lot of the complaints, right? And so I work with local governments and I hear some of their concerns and their struggles. And this MS4 program seemed to be one that was doing quite well, despite that a lot of the development that's happening up there. So I found one of their annual assessments that they had to do where they walked dry stream beds, and that one of the areas that they had walked was part of that HUC 12, and so kind of showed my professor some of the information that they gathered around conductivity and pH and how some of these things were in decent shape and how the riparian buffer zone might have contributed to that. So what are some, can't see. So then I started to think about, what are the solutions and the policy approach to this? How can we uphold a really strong MS4 program and one that protects riparian areas? And talked about some, the protections that we already have in there, how the golf course, which is managed by the local parks program, is actually causing some of the issues. And then just got a little bit into compensatory mitigation and in lieu fee, because that's its own whole beast. Okay, so this is just a larger map with the overlay of the MS4s as well. And it's kind of hard to see here. Not my proudest map, but you can see some of the development around Nashville, how that's kind of already lost, essentially. That's the way I feel like it, right? Restoration is their solution if we're looking at prevention and preventative type things, saving what we have existing in the Clarksville area. And then I put on here, next steps can be evaluating the MS4s that are better at protecting their riparian buffers. So why are some areas doing better than others? The other major factor that I knew was brewing by the look at that initial look at that map of the riparian zones and how healthy they were, how naturally vegetated they were, was agricultural risk. And so the Forests to Faucets database had a wonderful layer that was percent agriculture by HUC 12 as well. So I could go through and see those areas that were the highest agricultural use lands. If you remember correctly, I think the Dunbar Cave was like 23% agriculture. So that was on the lower end. Some of these HUC 12s with the red outlines were upwards of like 85% agriculture, 90% agricultural. And so I selected one of those that I wanted to dig a little bit deeper, try to figure out some of the factors at play there. Selected the Blue Bank Bayou near Haines, Tennessee. And you can see, turning on the satellite view, just how agricultural that land is, how carved up it was. And it's a little hard to see, but like running through the center of it there, that's a river. 92% agricultural land was this HUC 12, only a 10% riparian natural cover. And it was a very small land use change, right? So the development risk score was small. So just like looking a little bit deeper at what's going on in West Tennessee, I felt like the soil is too good here, right? So this was overlaying, I think it was a NRCS soils map, to see the different types of soils and, you know, some that are better at farming than others. So it felt like every piece of arable land in this area, the loamy soils, the flat, easily tillable terrain was taken up, farmed right to the edge. And so then, because like the PSM program that I went through, it was multidisciplinary. So I was looking at GIS, but then I was also did quite a bit of policy and law study as well. And so I wanted to bring in some of that because GIS was not necessarily my day to day. So brought in an analysis of the 319 non-point source program, which is, you know, funded by EPA, but locally administered in Tennessee by the Department of Agriculture, looking at some of the projects that they've done in West Tennessee, and some of the, I could say the focus areas, right? The small scale projects that they can cover with this funding. And then looking at, as well as a solutions policy approach for kind of restoring, right, at this point, these riparian buffers in the highly agricultural areas. So thinking about education of farmers, and NRCS, a USDA program, trying to teach them the benefits of planting riparian areas, in terms of like, I think, is that not my next slide now here? Well, I'll go back to that other one because that's important. But to show you some of the bank erosion that happens, right? So farmers are literally losing their land because they don't put in that buffer area that would help them retain the soil. And so one of the interesting things that I dug up, which I'm sure Brian is interested in as well, in my research, was a new program that USDA is funding through the state of Washington. That the USDA has, through NRCS, has several programs that pay farmers to either not till certain parts of their land, to plant their land in trees, right, for different reasons. And so the one here in Washington, in the state of Washington, just starting last year, was targeted towards riparian buffers. And so I thought that was a pretty innovative and exciting thing that maybe we could look at doing in Tennessee. How do we incentivize farmers by getting into their pockets directly in order to help restore these riparian areas in West Tennessee specifically? And so you can see they have different tiers for the different water quality benefits, essentially, that are provided by the natural vegetation when you restore those buffer areas. And then just wanted to talk a little bit about some of the success stories, the things that are working, small project by small project, and highlight. This ties back to the annual report because we focused one of the stories on the West Tennessee River Basin Authority and their work at Middle Fork Bottoms, our newest state park this year. And so wanted to talk about some of the stabilization projects that they were doing in the Madison County area near Jackson, Tennessee. So finally, just to compare conclusions and final thoughts, looking at the imagery of the SAD buffer in an agricultural zone versus a much more beautifully forested and restored buffer in an urban area. And so, just this, I don't have answers for this necessarily, but to ponder, what is the largest threat to riparian buffers in Tennessee? Is it agriculture or urban development? I think if we're looking at our current regulatory and legal frameworks and policies, the low-hanging fruit for conservation and to reestablish urban areas and their buffer areas and protect them is the MS4 program, right? We have that mechanism. But if we look at the pure acreage and impact 2 miles of stream in Tennessee, it's really, we could do more good in the agricultural areas. And so that also contrasts kind of the approach to environmental policy in general, right? The carrot, the trying to incentivize farmers not to farm these riparian areas to plant buffer zones versus the stick approach, right? The MS4s and putting an exact 30-foot buffer has to be in this MS4 area and protecting the riparian zones that way. So that's kind of how we find ourselves in the environmental policy world. And that's all I got, Brian.
Great job, Tara. Yeah, I'm always impressed when people from that program come to me with questions about what to do for their project. And just like you mentioned with Jeremy earlier, it's like you guys always take it to the next level and just really exceed all expectations. So I really appreciated how you were putting together all that information for geospatial analysis, but also taking that one step further to think about the policy and all the different programs that interweave, because it is very complex, not only in between things that TDEC has authority over, but then, there's other partners, external partners that have contributions as well. And that, that's both federal and state. So I really appreciate how you kind of weaved all that together and are using GIS for kind of a bigger picture. That was awesome.
Thanks. That's my complicated job. To try to weave all that together and explain it to the public.
Very cool. Yeah, if anybody's interested in the program, would encourage you to Tennessee Tech's program would encourage you to reach out to Tara and Jeremy and other folks that have been involved in that. It's really been we've had some heavy hitter GIS people come out of there, so it's really neat to see all the work that's generated from there. And if you're looking to take your GIS learning or education to the next step, that's a great university for those purposes.
And if you just dabble in GIS, it works too. You can take it as deep as you want. There's different courses paths you can follow within it. Yeah, it's a great program.
Very
and
cool.
It's all online now.
Oh, nice. That's good to know.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody have any questions? Feel free to throw them in the chat or come off mute.
Thanks for explaining MS4, Voyan. I was trying to go really fast.
Yeah, and I put a link to the Forest to Faucets data set. When I was initially learned about it and digging into it, there's just so many different attributes and so many different ways to tease apart that data, even beyond what they have done and what we have done. And it's just a really neat way to kind of visualize things on the hydrologic unit scale. So feel free to dig into that a little bit more as well. And then William's also mentioning the, how kind of like what you were, Tara, with kind of those political considerations as well, and how complex it is with just interweaving with all those different federal and state programs. And so, but I think it's just very important for us to understand where those gaps are and where we have the most strength, where those gaps are, where we can build those additional relationships and steer towards helping to inform better environmental stewardship.
Exactly.
Very cool.
All right.
Well, yeah, thank you so much, Tara. I really appreciate you and Callie being able to better empower our folks and give a lot more information about using GIS for all of our different programs here. So that's the biggest value of these meetings, in my opinion. So we'll dive into our next bullet point on the agenda is data stewardship. We've continuously been encouraging power users and data stewards to provide feedback, and we have a spreadsheet that's on our SharePoint site. And I guess it's worth mentioning currently that Michelle Pruitt there's been a recent revamp of SharePoint sites and migration to a newer format. So Michelle has been kind enough to kind of work through rebuilding a newer version of our SharePoint site for TDEC GIS users. That's currently in the process. So don't be surprised if you receive an email notifying you that to request for new access. When I was going in, I know I had to request access to the site again just because of where it's moved. So if you see something along those lines, don't be surprised, and just know that you can either request access again. We're kind of trying to figure out what's the best way to incorporate all of the different users to be able to have access to all the content. So that's where we would like to keep all the recordings and references on notes, and then also that spreadsheet on our authoritative GIS layers. So that'll be coming down the pipe here pretty soon. The next thing I just wanted to give a quick, if you're looking for GIS data in the state of Tennessee, then I'm going to post into the chat the tngis.org site. This is a volunteer effort by folks in TDEC. More recently, Paul and I, and Paul Dudley, who will talk here in just a moment about the annual conference for the Tennessee Geographic Information Council. He and I kind of led the volunteer effort, but we had a lot of other folks from Dylan Blankenship, who was on the call, and Andrew Wunderlich and Andrew McDonough all provided input and feedback on the TDEC site. So this is kind of an amalgamation of all the, this was an older site that had Tennessee Geographic Information System data. It's kind of a warehouse of data for the state from all different sorts of sources. So you'll see federal data sources there for data sets that are on the nationwide scale, but also data sources that are specific to our state in Tennessee. So check that out if you haven't already. There's tons of good stuff there. And we'll go ahead and move to, yes.
Brian, can you hear me?
We can.
Can I interrupt for just a second?
Please do.
Please do not go into the site or request access until I send out a link, because any link that you probably have is not there anymore. So you're requesting bad links. And I will send the new one out as soon as possible.
Thank you so much for mentioning that. And thank you so much for working on the new site. We really appreciate you keeping us all straight away there. So let's see. The next bullet point is upcoming trainings that are available. So as we mentioned in previous meetings, there are the Esri Massive Open Online courses. We refer to these as MOOCs, M-O-O-C. So there's one where registration opens on January 24th for Going Places with Spatial Analysis. That link is in the meeting invite. And then there's also the very popular Cartography Massive Open Online course. And that registration opens on April 3rd, 2024. I've heard a lot of people reference how useful the Cartography MOOC is just for learning ArcPro. If you haven't transitioned from ArcMap desktop software to ArcPro, that's also a very good and neat way to find tips and tricks, and also just kind of get your feet wet in ArcPro. And John Nelson, if you haven't heard of him before, he's one of the course instructors for that Cartography MOOC, and is just really fun. It's a really cool course and kind of keeps you laughing along the way and everything. It's really interactive and helps provide a lot of the framework material to get you some better skills in Pro and just cartography in general. And then last but not least, we have upcoming events. The Tennessee Geographic Information Council Annual Conference is April 9th through the 11th at Montgomery Bell State Park. And Paul, if you wanted to highlight some information about the annual conference, that'd be great.
Sure. Yeah. Happy to be here. Got to see some really cool work that I don't normally get to be exposed to. So thanks for letting me sit in and see the awesome GIS work that TDEC users are doing. So yeah, just to cover a couple of quick things. If you're not familiar with TDEC, Tennessee Geographic Information Council, we're essentially the GIS user community in the state of Tennessee. We host a lot of data, as Brian was saying, with tngis.org, as well as we have a jobs board, and essentially just play that, again, that community for all GIS users to come together, whether you're a GIS user with very little experience or with a lot of experience. It's a very welcoming community. And so just I'm going to put a couple of links in the chat. We've got our 2024 conference coming up, as Brian mentioned. So tngis.org, you'll get to come and hopefully you're able to get involved. There's lots of great business use cases and people giving presentations, so user presentations. Got great business partners, so Esri's usually usually there and got a great booth, and all of our great other partners. But I'll just, again, I put a link in the chat to this one specifically, which is the annual conference page, just for more information. We've got a breakdown, April 9th, having some pre-conference training, keynotes on GeoAI. We'll have an agenda posted up here pretty soon. Registration costs, so it's a cost-effective way to get professional development. It's only $275 for a member to attend the conference. We had to go up this past year, just as everybody else's costs are increasing, so are ours. But overall, it's a great way to get involved. So I hope to see you all there. If you know any students, there's lots of great opportunities for them as well. And I'll be happy to take any questions in the chat. Hope that gives a good overview, Brian.
That was awesome, Paul. Thanks for doing that with short notice. Appreciate that.
No
And
problem.
thanks for joining us today. We appreciate it. Yeah, so we'll kind of work through wrap-ups now. Andrew, I don't know if you have anything else. One thing I was going to mention was just, we're always looking for new presenters, people that are working on new stuff. We'll find you if you're building content on ArcGIS Online like Callie. So don't be surprised if we reach out individually as well. We start to hear about all the awesome work that you guys are doing, but also drop us a quick message, whether that's a call or an email or anything. If you have something that you're excited about working on more recently, we'd love to highlight that work within this meeting. So we hold these meetings quarterly, and so we'll be reaching out again with future invites, but just wanted to kind of give a plug there that we're always looking to highlight everyone's great work.
Yeah, and with that too, you notice that a lot of our meetings are half tutorial, half sharing of what other people are doing. So we're looking for new ideas on what you want to learn as an all of TDEC thing. We're trying to bring everybody up from the ground level. So some of this may be more in depth than others, but it's always great when we can follow it up with some real world examples like we did today. So shoot us in the chat what you want to learn in the next, for the next quarterly meeting, or shoot us an email. We'd be happy to try to accommodate. Every time we teach something, we're learning on ourselves how to do this stuff. So it's really fun. It brings everybody up. So please let us know any subject matter that you're interested in, whether it's stuff for the field or stuff on the computer, more in-depth things. We could break it out and provide more trainings anytime. We'll post this video recording on at least the Tennessee State Parks GIS YouTube page, and then also the TDEC GIS users group SharePoint page. Once we got that all set up, and we have all our recordings up there. So in the past, if you've missed out on how to create web maps or field maps, we've covered some of that. So please go back and check it out. All those stuff will be there forever. And it's really fun. Of course, I know you guys love to listen to our voices over and over again. But if you'd like to present or find something to learn about, just reach out and we'd be happy to have you.
Yeah, thanks for mentioning that as well. And just thanks everybody for being part of this strong community of TDEC GIS users. We really appreciate everybody's interaction and just coming here and providing great comments and questions so that we can all learn from each other. So thanks again, everyone. And so we're going to go ahead and wrap up now, and we'll start logging off. But thank you again, and hope you all get to enjoy a little bit more snow time. Go do some angels out there. Loved all those pics.
Thank you, Callie. Thank you, Tara. We'll see you all next time.